Okay, it's time to stun you. I'm sorry, I have to stun you because this is stunning research. This, my friends, is a hair shaft. And it has a flat spot. This is going to be a curly-haired person. That's what I found out. Now, this is where the skin was around it. That is a hair follicle, and I will show you that in some good detail. It is right there in my microscope. And that's a good size hair follicle. All right? And it will be shown to be exactly what I claim it to be. And this is what a hair follicle has. All right? It has a sebaceous gland. It has a pili erector muscle. So there's a little attachment there on the side of the bulb. And then the sebaceous gland, they show it up here. It's actually down here, on mine anyway. So let's take a look at that. Okay, so what should we see? We should see a muscle attachment. We should see a sebaceous gland. We should see a vein and artery, two little dots at the bottom. And then we should see the shaft coming up. So what are we looking at right there? That right there is the erector muscle attachment. It goes just like that, up and attached at the skin, and that makes your hair do that. That's the muscle attachment. The other side, right there, that's the sebaceous gland. That right there, and it's supposed to be way up higher, but it's right across from the pili erector muscle in mine. Now on the bottom, we also have the two little dots, which is your vein and your artery. And then there's the shaft rolling straight up around and coming straight up through the hair, the skin. All right, so the erector muscle, right up like that. The sebaceous gland, where it really is right on the other side of the follicle. You can see it right there. Just take a second, look. Like I said, the sebaceous gland should be a little lower. To me, that's what it looks like to me. Alright, like I showed you, this hair follicle is 500 times bigger than one in us. And I don't know what it's from, but it has all of the same exact characteristics. Well, it's a hair follicle. Let's just go with that. If you can dismiss that, then you've got issues, not me. Alright, now what is this? This is muscle. Alright, this is magnified highly. And this is what a sarcomere looks like. And here it is really highly magnified in an electron microscope. Let's see if we can find those in some of my mud fossils. Alright, so I'm going to tell you right now, I learned so much about anatomy from rocks, because these rocks are anatomical. That's where a bone was implanted. This is the tendon area, and then it runs into the muscle. This is it back here, but all we have is the tendon, so all we are is here. And then the muscle. This is just saturated red blood, and that is muscle tissue. That is literally the muscle tissue. Now, there's sarcomeres in here. You can't see them because they're so tiny, but they are in here, and that is that muscle assembly. And out here, the bundles start to break off because the connective tissue starts to get weak out there. You're really into your red muscle out there. Here, there's almost no blood because you don't need it. This is a little tendon that gives you that little bit of a spring to this muscle. Now, let's see if we can find that muscle, and we can. Before we move to that, though, this has been DNA tested, CAT scanned, everything. It's a human lung. It's a left human lung. That was the depression of the heart right there. This is what they call pleura. It's absolutely no question what it is. Very dense in blood. I drilled a hole in there very carefully, all cleaned, deep and then deep again to get, and it came out almost raw blood. They said it was excellent quality and it was human. And I had other ones done too, and the other ones were giants. I can't carry them around. That's just a normal bone. but they turn to stone. It's called nucleophilic substitution. It happens in a hot water flood with a lot of transition metals. That's the key. You have to have all that blood in there mixed around so it can carry those, which is, the blood has the transition metals. We have new species. Now let me show you how big these things get, because they get pretty big. Now I don't know who sent me this. Somebody sent it to me, but I know what this is. These are muscle sarcomeres. I'll show you in a second. This is literally like a bloody membrane. This is a bloody membrane, bloody. The sarcomeres need a lot of red blood in them, which I showed you in my chunk of muscle. There's a ton of red blood in there. If you don't have red blood, you can't do the work. That's why it's all gushing out of here. You see that? That's literally an artery, sending red blood all over this thing. Otherwise, you can't do the work. Now remember this, red blood servicing sarcomeres. Don't forget, that's a hair follicle. That's a hair follicle. Now let's see what muscle sarcomeres look like under the microscope. Well, here they are. I think maybe I already showed you this. But this is, you would never be able to see this under except for a microscope. Then it's more refined, and then right down to the actual sarcomere. And this is living tissue. And what I showed you before is virtually identical. It is identical. And here's what the living tissue looks like. These things slide back and forth like this. The red stuff erodes out, and you'll have all these little lines, and this is red stuff too. That erodes out. This will erode out. That'll erode out, and you'll have all these little blocks with stripes in them. All right, the one I showed you didn't have that. It was not all blocked out because it was just cut. That was cut. And we can see the muscle. Okay, anatomically, you see drawings like this, arteries and veins. They look very similar. One is blue because that's the expended blood, and one is red. And the red one can go either way. The vein has a clamp, so they can only go one direction. It can't go backwards. But they show them with a similar amount of little tubing coming out of them. That is really not the way it is. The red one pumps blood all over the place for muscles, as you see over here. I'm going to try to home in. I don't know if it'll pick it up or not, but wait a second. It's up above there, long distance. You see wherever there's, well, hold on, let me just do it this way. All right, let's come back here. You see wherever there's red blood right there? Trying to get into the muscles. They're going to be all over the place. They're showing only a few of them. Trust me, they're going to be everywhere. As you saw in those layers of muscle tissue. And these are sarcomeres. You're not going to see them here. They're too small to see in something like this. But that gives you a little better perspective on how these things branch out into the muscles. All right, check this out. This is solid blood, this whole layer, and it still is solid blood around the other side. But this particular area that was feeding this muscle eroded away, so we have a cavity here. But that's because this was just nothing more than blood, and that's what erodes away. Now, if this still had all of its bits and pieces, you'd see these little spikes coming out, which are the blood vessels which feed all that muscle tissue. Now guess where you can find this exact thing, and then you see the sarcomeres near it. This is on Mars from the Curiosity mission, 2014. I said to him, I said, this is an artery and a vein. That's the vein up above, there's the artery. These are the sarcomeres. I just showed you as clearly as you can possibly see it. Those are all those little connective tissue slats, and these are the breaks of the sarcomeres. This is the eroded red clay, really. It's red bloody cells that eroded from around here but still left the blood vessels, because this is on Mars. It's just got to do with sort of dry erosion, and it's eroding, but it's just sort of falling off underneath. And that's from NASA. And I never, oh, don't listen to NASA. Well, I followed this as close as the European Space Agency, NASA, Comet 67P. Trust me, I do my homework. So this is extremely valid, and this is exactly what it is an artery. And if mine hadn't eroded away, which theirs did, but mine would still have the things. Of course, I washed it and everything. I probably washed all that stuff out of there thinking it was just mud. This goes back 10 years. 10 years. And there it is with the bone part, which is up here. I didn't photograph it with the bone. I was just looking at the muscle at that point. And it all seems to have happened because of a hot water great flood. Emanuel Velikovsky recorded all of the documents around the world. He went and he collected them. He was a top-notch scholar, a friend of Einstein's. He went all around the world to every culture. They had the same story, great catastrophic worldwide flood, because we were almost impacted by a fiery comet, which later turned out to be Venus. And it's all recorded. And the result was hot boiling waters. And almost killed all the creatures on Earth. The only ones that survived were the ones that knew about what was going to happen and got to I would imagine, to the mountains and so forth. I don't know. But it was all documented, so they did survive. And if you read Worlds in Collision, and then he's had 3 other books after that, Ages in Chaos, something like that. But there was a time that the Earth was just almost totally devastated. And I believe that's what created all these flat-sided mud fossils. They're totally flat and preserved because of this nucleophilic substitution process of boiling them. All the flesh erodes away into clay and mud. And the organs, which had this protective layer, it turns into feldspar. It's aluminum silicates that are part of these blood chemistry that it's festering in this hot water, and it preserved them. And the rest turned into mud. And sometimes they turn into the skin and the membranes are what really protects the things. That's what made them turn into mud fossils. I was first going to call it fascia-facilitated fossilization, because fascia is what coats everything. It coats bones, it coats lungs. They call it pleura on the lungs because it's a little denser. But fascia is the coating of everything, even feathers. My friend Caesar here, see his feathers? They're made out of collagen. Collagen is what has these aluminum silicates are attracted to it and sealed it. Once it sealed it, like his neck and everything, it's still in there. But it turned it to what they call nucleophilic substitution, went in there, and it said, I'm going to change you to be basically what the chemistry is in the water. All right, sometimes they turn to basalt, sometimes they turn to limestone, sometimes they turn to mud. Sometimes they turn to glass, just straight quartz. All All right, there's a lot to learn here and a lot to understand, but before they can even get close to doing it, they got to open their minds. And when I say they, I'm talking about Yale and Harvard and all of these scholarly institutions that are getting a ton of money from these kids to teach them the truth. And here, right up here on Mars, they refuse to even engage about this. And there's the Mars blueberries, the same thing. These are gigantic creatures. I cannot explain that. It was all written in the ancient texts. Nobody ever took it serious. But I'm taking it serious now, I can tell you that.